Welcome to the Production Talk podcast with me, Jan of mixartist.com.au. In this podcast series, we celebrate the modern way of producing music. We want to talk about all things related to songwriting, recording at home, and music production. So if you produce your music at home, this is the place to be. Please subscribe and recommend this podcast to all your friends. This is the Production Talk podcast, episode 51. Welcome back to another episode of the Production Talk podcast. Today I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the country that this interview is recorded on, the proud Arakwal people of the Bundjalung Nation, and would like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. With me today is Mr. Adam Biggs, known as Biggsy of Biggsounds Productions, an authority in live sound. Welcome, Adam.
Oh, thank you so much, yeah.
Fantastic to have you today. So we're in a beautiful location here up in the hills in the hinterland. Thank you for welcoming me to your place.
No, it's a pleasure.
Would you like to first maybe introduce yourself and talk about your career in audio?
Sure.
Thank you.
The potted version. So I have a production company, Biggsounds Productions, which I have been running for 15 years, starting from very simple beginnings, like a couple of PA boxes in the back of a Magna sedan, and I started out because I was a musician who worked in a music store, who played music constantly, and bought a PA because my band wanted to gig, and I had zero concept of any of this stuff, so I just bought some speakers and some microphones and a little desk, and just kind of worked it out. And then friends started saying, "Hey, we've got a gig at such and such." Actually, my first paid gig as a sound guy was for Jules and Jim Kelly at the Lismore Jazz Nights, which was an institution in Lismore for many, many, many years, and had some incredible artists come through and play. And I came and did the PA for a friend's band that was playing at that, and Jules said to me, "Oh, we often have people come through that need a PA. Can we pay you $50 to come put a PA?" And I'm like, $50 sounds great. I just get to go and watch the gig for free and get paid $50. So so that was my introduction to being a live sound engineer. And I very much appreciate that what I got out of that gig was not just an opportunity to start doing this at a very basic level, but I made the decision very early on, where I was surrounded by all these amazing, university lecturers, guys like Jim Kelly and Steve Russell and Greg Lyon, and I made the decision very early on to accept any and all criticism and suggestion I got from these guys, because at the end of the day, they knew what they wanted to hear much more than I knew how to deliver it. And so I was a sponge. I just basically said, "You guys tell me what you want and I'll aim for that." And so that was the first few years of my work were basically doing that show, and then often sort of shows that sort of came off of that gig, like someone will tour through and do that gig, but then they'd need a PA for a show in Byron or whatever. And so I made a lot of mistakes. I had no training. I read a lot. This was before it was sort of YouTube and things like that you could go to as a reference. So I did a lot of reading. I did a lot of picking people's brains, and just a lot of work. I just went out and did a lot of gigs, and made a lot of cock-ups. I can vividly describe to you every terrible gig I did in those early days, because I think they were great learning opportunities. Yeah. And I just learnt it almost by feel. It was very untrained and very loose, but what I felt I got out of that was this hyper focus on delivering what the musician wanted, as opposed to what I had as a concept of what a band should sound like. So
yeah, right.
I've carried that through. I've always believed it's down to like, what is this person trying to deliver? You know, it's not my choice. It's not my decision about what they should be. It's down to, you know, what are they trying to achieve as a musician? And very much a focus on music and you know, carrying through my love of music into that and going, you know, at the end of the day, it's not about ego. It's not about how big I could make the sub sound. It's not about, you know, it's all that stuff. It's like, you know, is that what this band needs, you know?
Yeah, right.
So
that's a great attitude to have. You know,
and I try and
focus.
I try and convey all that to the people who work for me as well. Obviously, I've got a lot of young people coming through and learning with me, and that's the be all and end all as far as I'm concerned. You know, it's like, do you love music? Have you got a good attitude? And everything else I can teach you.
Yes, all right. Yeah,
but
of course.
Those two things to me are the absolute fundamentals of live music.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And then, in addition to running your own production company, you've also done some touring work, I believe.
Yeah. So,
can you share some of that?
That sort of came about through friendships, really. It came about through long associations with certain people, where, you know, I was sort of going in a different direction in my career. I was sort of on the tail end of a teaching degree and was sort of headed that way, and the production thing was just going to sort of pay the bills on the weekends, and then I had an offer. Right as I had an offer to take a full-time teaching job, and then I also had an offer off the back of having done an event for the Bentley blockade crew. There was a lot of the CSG protests happening in northern New South Wales at the time, and I was very heavily involved in that. And so I was doing all these little pop-up events and some major sort of protest events. And one of the people that came along to perform at one of those events was Pete Murray, and Pete and I got chatting afterwards, and, you know, we just, you know, shared sort of passion for the cause that we were involved in there, and we stayed in touch. And then he had an event. He had a tour in Western Australia come up where his usual guy couldn't do it, and he said, "Look, do you want to come on the road for a little run?" Cool. And that was my first official tour was with someone who at that point was a huge name. So it was it was definitely in the deep end. So that was sort of that. I also, through my work in the music shop, was friends with John Butler and Danielle Caruana. And Danielle and I had a really great friendship from her sort of doing a lot of stuff in the Lismore music scene. She went through the conservatorium in Lismore, and again, you know, so when she started doing the Mamakin shows, I sort of was involved in that from very early on, and very, you know, very gratefully, I've stayed involved with Danielle's stuff. So I've sort of basically worked on every iteration of her music career since. So I've sort of We Two Thieves and current Mamakin Spender and bits and pieces. So so mostly it's friendships, you know, like people I've worked with on shows. You know, Ziggy Alberts came and did his first paid gig at the Bruns Hotel, you know, and, you know, went from being a guy busking on the street to, you know, now an international name. And so again, it's just those friendships that you build up where you treat people right and you respect them and you do the best work you can for them. And, you know, it is one of those industries where people have a good memory for that stuff. They you know,
so it's all about the people.
It's all about the people, you know?
Of course. And I just, you know, have to notice, to note that you are sitting in front of me with a Bobby Alou t-shirt on. Big shout out to Bobby, who was on the podcast just a couple of episodes ago. And, absolute legend.
And absolutely. Yeah. Charles is just one of the nicest people in the business. And you know, again, you know, I have looked after a couple of local venues for many, many years, and one of which was the Hotel Brunswick, and I've done a lot of shows with Charles, the Bobby Alou crew. Before he was Bobby Alou, he was playing drums in Oka, and that's where we first met. I did some touring with Oka. I got to know Charles through that, and so we've had a long friendship and
lovely crew,
just wonderful. Good. So and amazing musicians. So someone who I've personally enjoyed the music of. My kids have been raised on that music.
Adam, what's the highlight of your career so far? If you had to name one show or one tour, I guess that's probably hard to say, but if you had to pick one,
look. In terms of the experience and being one of those one in a lifetime things, I had the great opportunity to travel to Nepal with Tony Childs, and I just by total coincidence, I was actually on a tour with Mama Ken. We're in Far North Queensland. We're on a John Butler tour, and I get a phone call from these people who ran the Bali Spirit Fest to say, "Hey, we've decided we want to get someone over as a consulting engineer for the Spirit Fest because we've struggled in previous years with local crews, etc. And your name's come up, and so I basically booked the travel to Bali to do this festival, and they said, look, a lot of the acts that are playing, it's Wild Marmalade and various people that I have had long associations with, and they said, so that's why your name came up, because all these people were like, well, why don't you get Biggsy, because he's and Tony Childs, and they said, look, probably the only person you won't need to mix there is Tony, because she's bringing someone. And Tony I had worked with on previous events, and so I got in touch and said, hey, I don't know if this might save you some money, but I'm going to be there anyway. And she's like, oh, well, one of the reasons we're bringing someone is because we're going to go from Bali across to Nepal to trek up into the mountains and do a show at the top of the mountain range. So we're going to trek a whole PA and crew and the whole works, film crew, etc., through the mountains for 10 days and basically do an event at the top of the mountain. And they're like, if you'd be interested in doing that, they're great. So again, I called my wife at the time, and I said, so this little run over to Bali for a week might turn into a few weeks. How does that feel? And my now ex-wife was very gracious and helped me do that, and looked after the kids and did the whole works. So shout out to Ruth, and I got to go and do this amazing thing where we literally trekked a PA, generators and all, up a mountain, and we had a team of Sherpas who are superhuman, and we got ourselves a little stick PA from AT Technologies up in Brisbane. They sponsored the whole thing by giving us this PA to try take
that's
up,
cool.
and some little tiny little lightweight vase amps and things like that for the band to play through, and the wonderful people at Technical Audio Group came on board, and they sponsored us by giving us this very snazzy little QSC touch mix console that had all the preamps and recording facility and everything in a little touchscreen mixer and mics and the whole works. They were wonderful. They gave us in-ears for the band, and they were awesome. So cool. So all these companies came on board with these super lightweight, low power draw solutions so that we could achieve this, because none of that stuff was in place when I came on board. It was literally this is the concept. This is what we're going to do. Yeah, I'm like, cool, how are we going to do it? And they're like, we haven't thought about that yet.
You'll sort it out.
Maybe you could come up with some ideas. So we had this great thing where we literally lugged this gear up a mountain, and a 5-piece band and Tony and a bunch of a bunch of a video guy and a camera person, and we literally walked up and down a mountain range to do this event. And I'll flick you a photo from the top of the mountain, which is kind of the pic that is hung around.
Cool. I would love to put that into the show notes.
Because it really is quite something. It's like literally sort of standing on top of this mountain at 6 a.m. with clear skies, with Everest, in the background, and it's insane. It's just I can't look at that photo and not just go, how did we do this? It's like literally like hot wiring. Power boards onto generators with my Leatherman, and
oh wow,
it was everything was shoestring budget, and everything was how do we make this work? How do we carry the least amount of gear to achieve this? Because it literally comes down to like how many kilos can one person carry to walk up a muddy slope for 10 days, so. It was crazy. It was absolutely crazy, but it was an incredible experience.
Tell us about the show. How did it turn out?
It was great. It was not like, it wasn't a ticketed show, obviously, because it was like literally at a viewing point at the top of the range, and we got up at 4 a.m. or something like that to drag all of the gear up to the sort of actual lookout point, which was maybe an hour's walk above the place we're staying. And we put everything up, freezing cold, like so cold, and we set everything up, and we put it all together. And by this point, in order to prepare for it, we had done several stops along the way where we'd gotten a bit of B-roll. So we had gotten, if we found a nice spot, we'd just stop there, set everything up, play a couple of tunes, like literally, in a paddock or the side of a cliff, or where there was a little outcrop where we could sort of set gear up, or incredible places. And in the staging village, we'd set up on top of a restaurant and right by this amazing lake. So we had already basically run the show with everything set up and working out all the, okay, this is going to work, this is not going to work, how much power are we drawing, how long have we got power for based on the, fuel consumption, that sort of stuff. We had done all of those bits and pieces. We went up, we did the event at the top of the mountain, and literally we were just simply playing to the people who were there to look at sunrise as it came up over Everest. That was the event. And all these people just hanging up going, why is there music here? Like it was wild. It was just one of those things where you could never replicate the energy and the sheer joy of like being in that space. And we're all, gloved up and beanies and multiple layers of jackets and stuff like that until literally the second when everyone has to start playing and whatever like that, because it was so cold.
Wow.
But it was incredible. And, we recorded it, and it was great. Some great footage shot, etc. So we did that. We came back down the mountain. We went back to the capital city. We flew out back to Bali to do one show before we came home. We landed in Bali and we heard about the earthquake in Nepal. So literally that had happened straight after we flew out of the country, like 12 hours after we flew out of the country. The entire country was decimated.
Gee.
So we still had people on the ground. We had people that had been involved in our crew were still there, and obviously the Sherpas and all these people that had helped us. And so it then became this whole different thing, coming off this amazing event where we were all just on such a high and like, wow, we've achieved this thing, and potentially it's like Guinness Book sort of level of like highest gig and things like that, which turned out wasn't. But we were on this incredible high, and then we got home and we're like looking at the devastation, and like literally towns wiped off the map, and just like the capital city in ruins, and just an incredible thing to come back to. So literally we pivoted this whole event into fundraising. So we then started doing shows with this band, and we did one out at Crystal Castle outside of Byron Bay, for, I think 2,000 people or something like that, fundraising shows and things like that, and many, many other shows with bands like Wild Marmalade and whatever, donating their time to come and play these big fundraisers to try and send some money over to the people who had basically made this thing possible for us.
Wow.
So
what a story.
Life-changing, man. It was really was.
Yeah, right.
Just totally changed my perspective on music. It's
talk about highs and lows, for the last of 10, 15 years, you've been probably one of the driving forces here of the live sound industry in the Northern Rivers. So at least my perception is that whenever I went to a great show, there was a good chance that you were on the controls most of the time.
Thank you.
So, and then suddenly COVID hit and the entire live sound industry came to a grinding halt. How did you survive as a live sound business? You're still here in front of me, still doing what you do. But, that must have been a real challenge. How did you get through that?
Look, when COVID hit, we saw it all happen overseas first. Obviously, we saw the thing in China and then Europe, and I was literally on my way. We were prepping to leave for an 8-week tour in Europe with Ziggy Alberts at that point. And I had literally dropped stuff onto a pallet at the shipping place in Brisbane, and everything was loaded up, guitars and, consoles and everything like that ready to go. Everything was, all our production forwards were done. We were ready to go. And we're like watching this stuff happen in Europe. And it literally was just watching the dominoes fall. And we were sort of, the tour manager and myself were sort of looking at going, okay, well, look, if Germany goes, we're done. We can't make this tour work without Germany. This not just the shows, but the transit points, et cetera, And so, I had conversations with Ziggy, and he was saying, look, it's not just about whether or not we can make the tour work. It's people are getting really sick over there. Are you, I had a brand new baby. He's like, are you still prepared to go? And so there was big conversations around that. And at that point, no one knew this was going to be an Australian problem. Like we literally, we did all of this stuff. We prepped all this tour, and then literally we cancelled it the day before we flew out, because it was just clear that, once Germany went down, it's like, okay, cool. Everyone's closing their borders. We can't go. I had other friends who were already there, and and on other shows, and were desperately trying to fly out, because they recognised that things were going to get really bad, and so we literally cancelled 8 weeks of touring, and then within the week after that, negotiating cancellation fees and all that sort of fun and games, within the week, we started hearing about it coming to Australia. And the speed at which everything stopped was staggering. I mean, obviously worldwide in every industry, but in the music industry, we literally saw 12 months of cancellations in a day. We had venues that just said, we're not doing this. We can't do this. So we literally just saw our entire slate wiped clean. Every show we had booked for the foreseeable future disappear overnight, and no idea when it was coming back. It felt very end of days. It was like everyone. It was just like, what's going to happen? So we're sitting at home and we're like, oh, okay. Well, I guess we're not working for the foreseeable. I had full-time staff. I had, obviously people who were relying on things. I, had all the various financial commitments that go with running a business. And so we were sort of like, oh, how are we going to do this? We pivoted into doing a few bits and pieces of, streaming events and, bits and pieces like that, where we would sort of be supplying equipment to people doing, online concerts and bits and pieces like that. I spoke to my accountant, and we sort of kind of came up with a sort of a strategy for sort of rejigging things while we went very flat. Thankfully, JobKeeper came up and saved all our butts. Basically the whole industry went on JobKeeper immediately.
Pretty much,
and it was brutal. It was really hard. A lot of friends really struggled with their mental health. I certainly did. That sense of everything you've worked towards just disappearing overnight and having no control over it. That was a huge deal, and a lot of young people in the industry sort of look at it and go, well, is this how it is? Is this just what this industry will be? No sense of planning for things, no sense of being able to sort of work towards goals because everything would just be stopped.
Yeah, a lot of businesses, live songs production business went out of business, but you're still here.
I was very lucky. I've always had the approach that I don't like to owe people money. So anything that I want to buy, and I mean, I'm a gear hound. I mean, the amount of crap I own is just ridiculous. But my attitude's always been, I won't buy it unless I know I can pay for it without any income coming in. Yeah. And so that was that saved me really, because I didn't have a lot of debt. And for quite a few months there, I was out building fences on the property here, and just doing the bulk of the childcare and doing all those sorts of things, and it was awesome, honestly. The first time in my adult life where I was off the road and I was, didn't have to be out gigging late at night. I could just stay at home and focus on the kids and enjoy playing some music, which was a novelty. So, look, good. In honesty, I think for as many people as COVID was tough, there are a lot of people who actually, needed that. It was a great opportunity to step back and go, what do I actually want to do in this industry? What do I want to achieve?
Time to reflect.
To reflect. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the people who are still in it are the people who took that time and thought long and hard about what it was they want from it. Yeah. And for some people, it was to get out. And I totally respect that. I think there's a lot of people who looked at it and went, you know what, this is not for me. Personally, for me, what it came down to was I don't want to spend as much time away on the road because that doesn't serve me at this point in my life. So I think everyone had their own stuff, and one of the great things that came out of COVID was the conversations with other people in the industry, because we were all in the same boat. Yeah. Everyone was in exactly the same position. And so there were a lot of people reaching out and saying, "Hey, how are you going? What do you need? Are you safe? Are you coping?" So in that sense, that it was wonderful to see within the industry that the level of compassion and empathy and support that people gave each other, and really sort of were there for each other. So I think as hard as it was on everyone's mental health, I think it was crucial for a lot of people that everyone was in that same position, and so we all got to support each other.
Yeah, that's really good to hear.
Yeah.
And then over the last couple of months, I guess, it's picked up again. And, first it started a bit and then it went back down. But lately it's been kicking.
It has been crazy. I mean,
I saw you on the controls at Blues Fest from a distance. You wouldn't have seen me. I was in the crowd dancing.
I think five bands I did at Blues Fest or something. So I had a few great shows there. I did Caravan of Sun, and they had been supporting Cat Empire in that tour, and so I did Caravan of Sun right before the final ever Cat Empire show. So I got to mix this great band and Mojo stage on the first night, and huge crowd and amazing energy.
I saw that show, and it was pumping.
Killer. So we got to do that, and then I got to pack up my console and then hang out at front of house with my 16-year-old son and watch the last ever Cat Empire show,
Yeah, it was a big bang.
Man, those sort of moments are what you do it for,
exactly.
That sort of thing where you can just,
So many of the musicians I know are at the moment completely booked. No?
Absolutely.
They are booked so well. Live gigs are back with a bang. And now we're at a time where, some of the live sound operators have gone out of business. And there seems to be a demand for operators. Is that right?
Absolutely. There's anyone who would like a job. Honestly, it is really, really hard to get staff at the moment because as with every industry, people have just made these decisions during COVID of where they are safest, and for a lot of people, safe means regular income, and so a lot of people left the industry. So some of the best engineers I know are now working in like IT, because the reality is that they know that will still be there if another outbreak hits, and so they're just gone. They're out of the industry.
So I guess quite a few bands find themselves in a situation where they have to do at least the smaller events by themselves and may not have an engineer.
Yeah, absolutely.
What advice and tips would you have for bands who need to mix themselves in smaller venues?
Look, I get asked a lot, like from musicians, going, what's the basics? Where do I start? And I literally had my good friend Luke Vasella over yesterday, the day before, and going through his rig and setup, and because he's one of those guys, he's someone who, in the majority of the events he plays, he's looking after himself. And we went through his setup and we looked at some stuff around gain structure, and we looked at some stuff around power and cabling, and just like fundamentals, like stuff that you think, oh yeah, you know that because you've been doing it forever. And this is not to throw shade on Luke. It's a commonality with a lot of musicians is that playing music is not really a technical brain pursuit. So when you're playing music, you're not thinking about the technology. And so it's really hard to do both of those things. It's really hard to be the engineer and the musician because they are fundamentally different parts of your brain.
Yes. I would almost say that it rules each other out in some ways. You can't do
it's really tricky. So,
good.
So that just that thing of just being able to go through with someone and say, well, we'll prepare. Like you need to know what you're coming into. You need to know what gear is available to you. You need to know what the minimum requirements for your setup are. If you're playing in a full band and you're playing in a stadium, then there's a very different level of minimum requirement to if you're a full band playing in a room to 25 people.
Yeah.
So you need to understand and really understand your sound, really understand what needs to be presented in your sound so that you can then look at it and go, okay, well, actually our minimum requirements is the vocal needs to be heard.
Yeah.
The guitars are loud enough. Yeah. The bass and drums are loud enough.
Yes.
The keyboards might need to run through the PA. But it's really about understanding those fundamentals, because it doesn't matter how big the gig gets, the fundamentals don't change. You still got to know, okay, what do we need in order to present a balanced mix? And a balanced mix can be as simple as turning around to the guitar player and saying, you need to come down a little. It doesn't necessarily need to be a technical solution.
Yes.
So
it starts on stage.
Absolutely.
With the volume on stage.
It starts and stops on stage as far as I'm concerned. And that's whether you're mixing yourself or you're working with an engineer or you're in a big production. It's so much about the source. So I don't think that changes. I think realistically, whether you're putting a single vocal mic up through a single speaker so that the vocalist can be heard in a small room, or whether you're doing a house concert and literally doing it acoustic, or the fundamentals don't change. It doesn't matter what the technology is.
Yeah.
It's about delivering the sound that you have in your head as a a band or as a soloist or as a whatever, an electronic act or whatever it is you are. It's about going, well, what do I need to deliver that to the audience in the way I intend it? My attitude has always been, even on small PA shows, is that I want to deliver a sound that feels like a big sound. Like, it's
a big sound.
A big sound.
No pun intended.
Yeah, it literally is one of those things where if I've got a couple of boxes on sticks and a basic console, I want people to feel like they're standing in front of, amphitheater stage, getting like the best possible delivery of sound. And it almost doesn't matter how much PA there is. It's like you can deliver that as long as you're thinking about what it is the band's trying to deliver. I worked with there's a Queensland band, Electric Lemonade, and 7-8 piece funk outfit.
Yeah.
It's super high energy, great interactions on stage. They listen to each other. And that was my show on Sunday night at the Bruns, and like literally vocal PA with a couple of subs, it was a very simple setup. But to me, it's like, okay, cool. Are the horns balancing out with the keys player? Are the vocals popping? Is there like energy there? Is there, do the drums feel big and like, present? And, is everything taking up its own space, and you can do that on any size of PA. The bigger the PA, obviously the more fun you can have and the more you can deliver to more people. But it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter how big the PA is, because if you can't get all of that working together, a terrible mix on a big PA just sounds like a terrible mix.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's I think at the end of the day, it's not about how much money you've spent on gear. It's not about how much gear you're carrying into the venue. It's about like what do you need to make that work?
Yeah, that's a good point. Very rarely do I run into a show where I think, oh, they don't have enough gear.
Yeah,
it's most of the time it's the exact opposite, that there's a lot more gear present than actually needed for the event.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, good point. So what is it in your life that makes it harder for you to pull a good sound? When you work with musicians, what common mistakes do you see where people, probably unintentionally, I guess, do things that make it harder for you to pull a good sound?
Yeah. Look, I guess it's different for different things. So volume is probably the first thing that I'd talk about. There's this sense, particularly as you get into bigger stages and bigger acts, there's this sense that it's not working unless it's working loud. And the amount of bands you get up on stage and you're like singing up, and it's like, it's quite simple, it might be just like acoustic or whatever. And people are like, oh, I need more guitar in the fallback, or I need, like when you make the vocal like really loud, or this, that, and the other. And, it's so counterproductive, like incredibly counterproductive, because the louder things get, the less control you have. It's like.
Can you explain on that?
Yeah.
Why is that?
So, like let's look at it from a band perspective. So we've got a 4-piece band. We've got guitar, bass, drums, and a vocal. So you've got a vocal, and that to some point is a fixed volume. So someone, when they're singing, can sing to a certain volume comfortably and within their range and their dynamic ability. So to a degree, that's a fixed volume. So as an engineer, what we're doing is we're putting a microphone in front of that fixed volume, and we're adding gain to a point where we can then amplify that into PA. So it's very similar to recording, but there's an interaction that you don't have when you're recording, when you're working live. There's an interaction between what you're adding in gain to that microphone and how much that interplays with fallback wedges, interplays with the PA out front, interplays with the room reflecting the PA.
Yes,
all of those things. So so you've got hard limits. You've got hard limits for where you can take that vocal.
So you're saying there's trade-offs.
Yeah,
It's not just only an advantage of gaining it up, but from a certain volume you get disadvantages, like
100%.
I guess spill into other microphones.
Absolutely.
The PA feeding back into the microphone, blurring everything you touch. Yeah.
So if we think about like a vocal as being like obviously a fairly key thing, for the majority of bands, the vocal is the focus.
Yes.
People want to hear the lyrics, they want to understand, they want to feel that emotion traveling, and if you've got a drummer sitting behind a singer, like, using all of their gym chops to like hit that snare at 110 dB on every single stroke, and you've got a guitar player who's just bought their new
full stack Marshall,
the AMB cabs, the whole works, and a bass player who's competing with that by they've now got their 2,000 watt head and like a couple of 410 cabs. There's so much volume.
Yes.
So much volume, so much power in those instruments that you will never, ever compete with a single vocal.
So if you try to gain it up, what do you get?
So to me, I always try and explain it to my staff when I'm training and whatever like that. I always tend to treat it as, you look at a channel strip on a console, and the first thing up the top below where you plug the microphone in is a gain control. Now, to me, the way I explain it to my crew, the gain control is the ears of the console. Now, the more you turn up that gain control, the more you hear, the more you're bringing into your ears. So if you can keep your gain nice and low and appropriate for the volume that the person is singing at, and obviously between songs is speaking at and things, if you can set the gain structure in such a way so that you're sort of you're not going into you're not pushing it into the red, but you're also not like sitting way below unity gain. So you sort of you're trying to find a nice midpoint there so that it sounds nice, it sounds rich. They've got a bit of movement, they can sort of get in and out off the microphone and use their own dynamics to sort of work the tone.
Yeah.
So cool, you've got that happening. You've set that up really nicely. Now the thing is, if you've got a singer that is really, really getting smashed by a hugely loud band on stage, they're going to have to be hearing themselves more. So they're going to need one of two things. You're either going to have to turn the gain up on the microphone so that there's more sensitivity in the mic so that you can then push more back towards them in the fallback, or you're going to have to like turn the gain down so it's not hearing quite as wide a spill. The lower the gain on the microphone, the less it's going to be picking up your guitar player staying right next to you playing at 95 dB or whatever. That's the huge trade-off, and in the live sound world, that's the difference between a good show and a very mediocre show, is how much everyone's prepared to work together to deliver the band as a show, not their particular element of that. So, I know I'm picking on guitarists. I am a guitar player. I totally appreciate the joy of having a nice loud amp behind you. So yeah, it's that thing of going, well, okay, well, if I need to turn the gain down on the vocal mic so that it's not hearing quite so much spill off the guitar amp, now I'm working at a suboptimum position with the vocal itself. That singer might have to like lean into the mic more and be really chewing that mic in order to be able to hear themselves in the fallback. That one, it rapidly decreases my dynamic range because they can't actually use their own training and dynamics to get on and off the microphone as they need it. It's increasing, obviously the closer you get on a microphone and the more bass response you have, things like that. So now I'm on the EQ and I'm trying to fix things because of like, now it just sounds really boomy and I'm not getting the cut and I'm not getting the tone. And it just becomes this massive trade-off.
It's like a domino game, basically.
Absolutely.
If something goes wrong on the stage, it just has knock-on effects on everything else. Yeah.
So, like by and large, the biggest thing I try and get people to think about is that sense of like all those parts are super important.
Yep.
And if you let one of those things go, then everything else suffers.
Is it correct to say that, the band, drums, bass, guitar, keys, and so on, they should therefore be sensitive towards the singer and adjust the volume correlated to the singer. So meaning when the singer sings quiet, the band should be quiet.
Absolutely.
Or when the singer is, yelling like crazy, then the band can come up. Is that fair
absolutely.
to say?
And it really is just that thing of like it's the band working as a unit,
Yes, that's really well said. So the opposite would be if we have a really loud drummer combined with a quiet singer. That's trouble.
Very, very hard.
Yeah.
Very, very hard. And there's obviously things you can sort of go, it's like, well, okay, we've got a really loud drummer. And some drummers are awesome like that. They know they're hard hitters, but they'll be like, well, cool. Well, how about we set the drum kit off to the side of the stage rather than like directly behind the singer. And I'll play with, hot rods instead of sticks on these tunes or whatever like that. There's those sort of things that you can adjust. Position on the stage can be a pretty huge one. So that, like you can actually go, you know what, it's not going to work to have the loudest instrument in the band right next to the quietest instrument in the band. So let's have a look at how we set that up.
And what about stage size? If we consider it, let's say, a small stage where the entire band is crammed together compared to a large stage where there's space in between people. Does that make a difference?
Oh, yeah. And the room, like obviously, it's not like a studio situation where you walk in and you've got like a vocal booth that's like deadened off completely, and we've got, like soft things around the room to sort of, control reflections, and we've got, all that. Like the average venue you walk into is not that at all. It's a big open space, and when I sound check a band, I get to a certain point in a sound check, I'm like, cool, now we just have to wait for the meat blankets, because at the end of the day,
the meat blankets.
So
so you're referring to the audience being a really good absorber.
So that thing of like, there's only a certain amount of things you can do to offset a big space, or even a small space in terms of its impact on the sound. So it is about listening, and it's about communicating and being really mindful of each person's role in delivering what they want, and at the end of the day, like if you have a band that walks on stage where everyone's got their own sort of agenda and they've got their own thing that they're like, that they really want to show off this thing they can do, or they really want to sort of, like that sort of ego-driven stuff. It sort of weeds out the higher up in the industry you go.
Right.
The more professional the band, the less you see of that.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah. I think largely due to the fact that you just don't make it big unless you're prepared to have some humility and have some, have some understanding of the role of everything. And
that really resonates with me. I've always lived by the idea that, musicians on stage shouldn't showcase themselves, but they're there for the other musicians.
Yeah, they're there for the song.
And if everybody is there for everybody else,
absolutely.
The band, it's so much better.
You're there to serve the song, and I'm there to serve the song. So, like if I'm mixing a band and what that really needs is, for the bass player to turn the fuck down. Sorry, that's part of my role is to talk to them and go, hey, we're not going to be able to get what we need without this adjustment.
Okay, so at this point of the interview, we're having a little break. Adam and I, we actually chatted for quite some time, so I decided to split this interview in 2 parts. And this is the end of the first part today. I'm sorry, but it's okay. You can tune in again next week when the second part of the interview comes out on Tuesday morning. If you want to make sure not to miss it, just simply subscribe in your podcast app and you will get a notification. That's how easy it is. In the meantime, if you would like to reach out to me, you can do so via my website mixartist.com.au, where I offer music mixdown services to everybody who needs a little bit of help pushing their projects to the finish line. Okay, hope you got something valuable out of today's episode. Thank you again for sharing all your wisdom, Adam. I'll speak to you again next week. This is all for today. Bye for now.